Hello and welcome to Pitboards and Podiums with me, Maya Westwick. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about Carlos Sainz, so buckle up and let's talk F1. Alright guys, so as I said, today we are doing the driver profile about Carlos Sainz, so I'm going to be talking about him. He currently drives for Ferrari, and he's actually driven for quite a few Formula 1 teams, which I will talk about. He is 29 years old, his birthday is the 1st of September 1994, so he's a Virgo, and his full name is actually Carlos Sainz Vázquez de Castro, because he's Spanish, so the way that names work in Spain, he's got Carlos Sainz, like Sainz is his dad's surname, and then Vázquez de Castro is his mum's surname, and he was born in Madrid. So as I've said, Sainz is his dad's surname. He is the son of Carlos Sainz Sr., who is a double World Rally champion. Most recently, he competed in and won the 2024 Dakar Rally, which is like a 12-day or something rally. It's a big event, and at the age of 61 he won it. So obviously Carlos comes from very much a racing heavy lineage, like it's something that's kind of in his blood, and he began his professional karting career in 2006 competing in the cadet class before moving up to KF3 in 2007, and his highest championship finish in 2007 was third in the CIK FIA Asia Pacific Championship. In 2008 he achieved his first championship win, once again in the CIK FIA Asia Pacific Championship, and then in 2009 he achieved a third place finish in the WSK International Series, second place in the Spanish Championship and the CIK FIA European Championship, and first in the Monaco Kart Cup, all again in the KF3 class. In 2010 he then moved up to compete in the Formula BMW Series, so he made his debut as a guest driver in Formula BMW Pacific. He did that at Sepang in Malaysia, but because he was only a guest driver, not a full-time driver in the series, he was ineligible to score points. Of the races that he competed in, because he did not compete in all of them, he was only a guest driver, he placed second at the first and 8th race, fourth in the second race, first in the 4th, 6th and final race of the season in Macau. So in 9 races, he achieved 3 pole positions, 2 wins and 2 fastest laps. And then in the Formula BMW Europe Series, he raced that as a full-time driver, so he was able to score points in that, and he finished the season 4th with 227 points, with 1 win, 2 pole positions, 2 fastest laps and 5 podiums. He also, in 2010, joined the Red Bull Junior Driver Programme after impressing Helmut Marko with his drives that year in Formula BMW. In 2011, he competed in Formula Renault 2.0, finishing second in the championship and first in the Formula Renault 2.0 Northern European Cup Series. He competed in his first 3 Formula 3 Euro Series races and the Macau Grand Prix with the French team Signature as well. And then in 2012, he moved up to Formula 3 full-time with Carlin Motorsport, competing in British Formula 3, Formula 3 Euro Series, FIA Formula 3 European Championship, Masters of Formula 3 and the Macau Grand Prix. In the British Championship, he won 4 races, he got 9 podium finishes and 1 pole position, finishing 6th overall in the championship. And then in the Euro Series, he scored 2 podiums and 2 pole positions, finishing 9th overall, and they were his best championships out of all of the series that he competed in that year. In 2013, he signed with Arden to compete in GP3, finishing the championship in 10th. He also competed in Formula Renault 3.5, finishing 19th in the championship because he missed a lot of the Formula 3.5 races due to his GP3 commitments. In July 2013, he drove a Formula 1 car for the first time, driving the Toro Rosso STR8 and the Red Bull RB9 in the Young Drivers Test. In 2014, he then moved to DAMS in the Formula Renault 3.5 series, and he did that full-time that year, winning the championship with 227 points, 7 wins, 7 poles and 6 fastest laps. As a reward for winning that title, he drove the Red Bull RB10 in the post-season test after the 2014 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. In 2015, Sainz then joined Formula 1, driving for Toro Rosso, the Red Bull Junior team, alongside Max Verstappen, and he chose the number 55 to be his race number. He scored his first Formula 1 points on his debut at the Australian Grand Prix, finishing P9, and he had 4 consecutive retirements, bless him, with electrical failures at the Austrian and British Grand Prix, and he had a fuel pressure issue at the Hungarian Grand Prix and a power unit issue at the Belgian Grand Prix. During practice at the Russian Grand Prix, he crashed at 150 kilometers an hour, which resulted in a 46G impact into the barriers and an overnight stay in hospital. He missed qualifying because of that, but he was declared fit to race and he was allowed to take part in the race by the stewards, but he did fail to finish the race because he had a brake failure. His best finish of his rookie season came at the US Grand Prix. That was finishing 7th after starting in last place due to a crash in qualifying, and he finished the season 15th in the championship with 18 points to Verstappen's 49. In 2016, Sainz remained at Toro Rosso alongside Max Verstappen until mid-season. Verstappen was promoted up to Red Bull to replace Daniil Kvyat, who was then demoted down to Toro Rosso. And he achieved his career, highest finish so far, a P6 at his home race, the Spanish Grand Prix, and matched the result at both the US and Brazilian Grand Prix as well. He ended the season 12th in the championship with 46 points. In 2017, Sainz and Kvyat remained teammates at Toro Rosso. Sainz had a few collisions and a few near misses in the 2017 season. He had a collision with Lance Stroll that eliminated him from the Bahrain Grand Prix, for which he did actually receive a grid penalty for the next race. He had a first lap collision with Romain Grosjean and Felipe Massa at the Canadian Grand Prix, for which he received another grid penalty. A spin on the first lap of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix while trying to avoid a collision with teammate Kvyat, and then a first lap collision with Kvyat at the British Grand Prix that eliminated him from the race. He also had a first lap crash at the Japanese Grand Prix as well. So obviously that's 5 races that were massively affected by collisions and all of that sort of thing, just incidents that meant that he was not going to be scoring optimal points. He also suggested that perhaps Toro Rosso wasn't really doing anything for him anymore, and before the Austrian Grand Prix he commented that it was unlikely that he would stay with the team for a 4th season because he wasn't really getting anywhere with them. That comment was rejected by Red Bull team principal Christian Horner. Christian Horner was like, no, he's staying. But then by the time it was the Singapore Grand Prix a little bit later on in the season, it was announced that Sainz would join Renault on loan from Red Bull for the 2018 season, after which he finished the race at the Singapore Grand Prix in his best finish so far, 4th place. So, something about the news of leaving really freed him there. From the Malaysian Grand Prix and also the Japanese Grand Prix, he was partnered with Pierre Gasly because Daniil Kvyat was dropped by Red Bull entirely, and Pierre Gasly was put into the seat alongside Carlos Sainz at Toro Rosso. But then he didn't even finish the season with Toro Rosso because Renault, who of course he was going on loan to for 2018, they decided to drop their driver Jolyon Palmer for the last 4 races of the season, and that meant that Sainz moved to Renault 4 races early before the end of the season and partnered Nico Hülkenberg for these final 4 races. Of these 4 races, he had to retire from the Mexican Grand Prix with steering problems and the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix with a loose wheel after a pit stop, which obviously is not ideal, and obviously the retirements weren't his fault, they were out of his control. So he did end up ending the season 9th in the championship with 54 points. In 2018, which was his first and only full season with Renault, Sainz finished 10th in the Drivers' Championship with 53 points to Hülkenberg's 69, scoring points in 13 of the 19 races he finished. The 2 races that he didn't finish were the British Grand Prix after a crash with Romain Grosjean and the Mexican Grand Prix after retiring with battery issues. And then Renault decided that they were going to replace him with Daniel Ricciardo for the 2019 season, which left him needing to find a new Formula 1 seat to stay in the sport, which he found in McLaren. So with his move to McLaren for 2019 onwards, Sainz ended his association with Red Bull. He wasn't with McLaren on loan from Red Bull. He was no longer part of the Red Bull universe. He partnered rookie Lando Norris, replacing Fernando Alonso at the team, and after quite an unlucky start to the season with an engine fire at the Australian Grand Prix and first lap collisions at the Bahrain and Chinese Grand Prix, he consistently scored points, often finishing best of the rest behind the Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull drivers. But he did have to retire from the Belgian Grand Prix with power issues on the second lap of the race, and the Italian Grand Prix after a wheel was fitted incorrectly in a pit stop. He earned his first F1 podium at the Brazilian Grand Prix after starting in last place. so P20, and he's finished on the podium. So he had an engine problem in qualifying, which meant he couldn't take part in qualifying, which is why he started at the back of the grid. And then by the penultimate lap of the race, he'd made his way up to P5. And then obviously on those last couple of laps, Hamilton and Albon had a little battle. P3, P4 had a little battle that resulted in Hamilton hitting Albon spinning out. That meant that Hamilton was then up onto the podium in P3, Sainz was up to P4, Hamilton then received a penalty for the incident with Albon, dropping him down and pushing Sainz up to P3. So not the most conventional way to get your first podium in the sport, you know, not really getting to celebrate it properly, but he did earn his first ever podium with a very good drive, like to get up to P3 from 20th. Very, very good drive. He finished the season P6 in the Drivers' Championship with 96 points, 1 point ahead of Gasly and 4 points ahead of Albon, both of whom had driven for Red Bull that season in like a much superior car to him. Obviously, they only had like half a season in that car each. And he was also ahead of his teammate Lando Norris, who scored 49 points that year, because Lando's rookie season, I've already spoken about it, but Lando's rookie season was not good. Like, that McLaren was not a good car. It just failed all the time. He retired from so many races. In 2020, he continued on with McLaren, and he actually set a new lap record at the Red Bull Ring in Austria while achieving his first fastest lap in Formula 1. He failed to start the Belgian Grand Prix due to a power unit issue on the reconnaissance lap, so the lap to the grid before the race. He qualified third at the Italian Grand Prix and was in 6th place when the race was red flagged due to Charles Leclerc having an accident. He then passed 3 cars and benefited from Hamilton receiving a penalty for entering the pit lane when it was closed to move up to 2nd place behind Pierre Gasly with 20 laps remaining. Ultimately, he finished 0.4 seconds behind Gasly, and that meant that he was taking his second Formula 1 podium and, at the time, his career best finish. He then had to retire from the next 2 races at the start of each with a multi-car accident at the Tuscan Grand Prix on a safety car restart on lap 6, where basically the back of the field just went before the front of the field did, and then they all crashed, and it was very dramatic, and like it could have been a lot worse than it was. It really was not good. And he crashed into a wall at the Russian Grand Prix on the first couple of laps. He did briefly lead the Portuguese Grand Prix after gaining 6 positions in the first 2 laps, but ultimately he did finish that race in 6th, and he finished the season 6th in the championship with 105 points to Norris's 97, and he managed to claim 6 top 5 finishes, which, considering the McLaren again, it was a better car than 2019, definitely, but it was still not really up there in terms of the actual ability compared to like Red Bull and Ferrari and Mercedes, even though Ferrari weren't as good that year. Like, he did very well. In 2021, Sainz then moved from McLaren to Ferrari to partner Charles Leclerc on a 2-year contract with the team. He took his 3rd career podium and his first podium with Ferrari at the Monaco Grand Prix with a P2 finish, because obviously at that race, Leclerc didn't even start the race when he was meant to be on pole, and Bottas retired because his pit stop lasted about 3 days. Like, I'm not even exaggerating there. Google what the record is for the longest pit stop in Formula 1, and it's genuinely about 3 days, because they couldn't get the wheels off of Bottas's car for 3 days. Obviously, he benefited from both of those drivers who normally would be at the front of the field not finishing the race, or in Leclerc's case, not even starting the race. So he was able to do very well, because obviously Monaco is very difficult for overtakes and things like that. It's very much where you qualify, sometimes it's where you finish. Like, it's hard to make up positions at Monaco. He managed to do just that and finish in P2 with Lando Norris in P3, which was very nice for them, because obviously they have a little bromance going on. He achieved 3 more podiums that year at the Hungarian Grand Prix after Sebastian Vettel's disqualification, which meant, of course, he was not able to celebrate that one either, at the Russian Grand Prix and at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix at the last race of the year. He criticised the handling of the safety car restart on the final lap of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. I've spoken about it, I'm not going to go into it. We all know what happened on the last lap of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in 2021. However, Sainz criticised that because only the cars between Hamilton and Verstappen were allowed to overlap themselves, which meant that the cars that were between Verstappen in P2 and Sainz in P3 were not allowed to do that. So Sainz couldn't try and get past Verstappen on the restart because there was people in the way, even though Verstappen could go after Hamilton. And also, it made him vulnerable to people behind him because he had lapped cars ahead of him that would be slowing him down when people behind him were chasing him down to try and get a podium finish. He still managed to finish on the podium, but he was not very happy with that at all. And he ended the 2021 season 5th with 164.5 points, 5.5 points and 2 positions ahead of Leclerc. In 2022, Ferrari achieved a 1-2 finish at the Bahrain Grand Prix, the first race of the year, with Sainz in P2. At the Australian Grand Prix, after starting 9th, though, he dropped places at the start. He just didn't really get a very good start, and then he span in the gravel and ended his race on lap 2 of the whole race. It was not good for him. He crashed in qualifying for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, then collided with Daniel Ricciardo on the first corner of the first lap, ending his race. So again, not a good weekend for him. He did manage to achieve his best ever home race result at the Spanish Grand Prix with a P4 finish. Even though he span earlier on in the race and then had to recover after dropping down to 11th, he got all the way up to P4, which is the best he'd ever finished at home. He qualified and finished second in Monaco, but then not long afterwards, he suffered his third retirement of the year at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. He finished the Canadian Grand Prix in P2, less than 1 second behind race winner Verstappen, and he took his first F1 pole position on his 150th race start at the British Grand Prix, beating Verstappen by 0.034 seconds in a wet qualifying session. He then went on to claim his maiden win in Formula 1 after fighting Verstappen and Leclerc for the win. So he won his first ever Formula 1 race with his first ever pole position. Very nice for him. An engine failure then ended his race in Austria the next week, and then he took his second pole position at the Belgian Grand Prix and started P1 because Verstappen had a penalty, so even though he qualified second, he started first. Eventually, he did finish third, though, behind both of the Red Bulls. He crashed out of the Japanese Grand Prix from third place. It was very wet, and that was on the opening lap that happened. And obviously that's where some of the controversy from that race comes from, because of Suzuka having a history with having the cranes out on track when they shouldn't be on track, and obviously Jules Bianchi died after he crashed into a crane at Suzuka. So for that to have happened again, and then for the FIA and the stewards and all of that to just kind of blame Pierre Gasly, it was dodgy. I spoke about it on the TikTok at the time, but that was because of Sainz's incident, because he crashed out. Obviously, the crane was there to recover his car. Should not have been there until the cars were safe, but you know. He claimed his third pole position of his career at the US Grand Prix, but had to retire from the race with damage after being hit by George Russell at the first corner. And he finished the championship P5 again with 246 points to Leclerc's 308. And he signed a contract extension to race with Ferrari until the end of 2024. So as things stand at the moment, we know that he is going to be racing with Ferrari for this year. And we also know that he's in talks with the team for a contract extension, but nothing has been confirmed yet. So that is something that we're just going to have to keep an eye out for this year, as to whether he negotiates another contract with Ferrari or if he negotiates a contract with another team after this season. In 2023, he criticised the severity of a penalty that he got at the Australian Grand Prix right at the start of the season that dropped him down from 4th in the race finish to 12th, because he'd made contact with Fernando Alonso during the second safety car restart of the race. It was chaotic. But his penalty, because of the safety cars, he had, I think it was only like a 5 or 10 second penalty, but because of the safety cars and how late into the race it was, everyone finished right after each other, so he was dropped down out of the points for something that, it just seemed a bit harsh. Alonso also agreed it was harsh. Sainz massively criticised it. Ferrari did lodge a formal complaint, but nothing came of it. They were unsuccessful, so he had to just take it and not score any points. He crashed in practice at the Monaco Grand Prix and spun during the race, eventually finishing 8th after starting the race in 4th. He qualified 2nd at his home race in Spain, but finished 5th after struggling with tyre degradation. And he crashed in qualifying at the Canadian and the Hungarian Grand Prix, and retired from the main race of the Belgian Grand Prix after a first lap collision with Oscar Piastri. He achieved his first pole position of the year at the Italian Grand Prix, 0.013 seconds ahead of Verstappen, finishing the race in 3rd, which was his first podium of the season. He took pole the next week in Singapore, converting it to his second Formula 1 win, ending Red Bull's streak of 15 consecutive wins and becoming the only non-Red Bull race victory of the 2023 season. That was also the race where he did his DRS masterclass with Lando Norris, basically using Norris to protect him from the charging Mercedes cars and securing his victory. Very nice. It was beautiful. And also securing Lando's P2, because keeping Lando in DRS meant that the Mercedes couldn't get him either. He then failed to start the Qatar Grand Prix after a fuel leak on his car. He finished the US Grand Prix 4th, but he was promoted to the podium after Hamilton was disqualified post-race. And then at the inaugural Las Vegas Grand Prix, he hit a loose manhole cover during practice. Obviously, it's a street track. There's manholes in the streets. They had not secured all of them. They hadn't done a proper job of making sure that the track was secure. So during the first practice session, I think it was literally like 8 minutes in, it wasn't even long into it. During the first practice session of the first ever Las Vegas Grand Prix, he hit one of these manhole covers and it shot up through his car, literally ripped a hole through his car. Like, that could have been very, very dangerous. And that meant that the first practice session had to be cancelled, and then the second practice session was massively, massively delayed, and it was a whole thing because obviously they then had to check that the rest of the track was secure. In qualifying, he qualified second behind his teammate Leclerc, but he had to take a 10-place grid penalty, so he started the race in 12th. Because of the damage that was caused by the track, because of this manhole, the damage from that, Ferrari obviously had to use parts that were outside of their allocation because a manhole had ripped through their car and they had to fix the car. And then because they'd used these parts that were outside of their allocation, and they'd worked outside of part fermé conditions because of, like, they'd broken the curfew and all of this, he had to start with a 10-place grid penalty, which obviously was very controversial because it wasn't him that he hadn't crashed, he hadn't done something, the Ferrari hadn't done something wrong, it was the track. It was literally the organisers of the race that were at fault, and the organisers of the Las Vegas Grand Prix was Formula One. So Fred Vasseur, the team principal of Ferrari, said that it was unacceptable because the damage was the fault of the Grand Prix. He did recover to finish the race in 6th, but obviously who knows where he would have finished had it not been for that grid penalty. And then at the final race of the year, Abu Dhabi, with absolutely no hope of scoring any points because he was not having a good weekend, Ferrari retired him from the race, which meant that he finished the season P7 in the championship rather than 4th. It dropped him all the way down there because he was not able to score any points, but he wouldn't have scored any points anyway if he stayed out. Sainz called that very disappointing. Of course it is, you know, you going into the last race of the season thinking you're going to finish 4th and then you finish 7th, it's disappointing. So he ended the season with 200 points to Leclerc's 206. So that is everything that I was going to say about Carlos Sainz. I just kind of wanted to give a little rundown of his career so far. Some of the highs and lows, you know. Some seasons when the points tally necessarily isn't that high, obviously there's reasons for it, like with his retirements and stuff. So I've spoken about all of that, and yeah, I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, please let me know, you know, like, rate, comment, subscribe, share the podcast. I would really, really appreciate it. And I will see you very, very soon with some more episodes. So I'm going to be doing the Red Bull drivers next. So we'll have Max Verstappen and then another F1 for Beginners episode and then Sergio Perez. And then the week after that, I'm doing the AlphaTauri drivers. So obviously they're not called AlphaTauri anymore. They're called Visa Cash App Racing Bulls this year. So I'm going to have to get used to that. Yay. But yeah, thank you very much for watching / listening, depending on what you've consumed the podcast on, and I will see you very soon with another episode. Bye!